I think the job search should never stop. You should always be proactively talking to companies, looking for the next best thing, even if you're 100% content in your current role. Hires do come in waves. So you want to be caught up in this. You want to be positioned well and having the right conversations and sort of leveraging your network and expanding your network constantly. I'm always trying to push people to take earlier stage opportunities. And what I find about CFOs is they're like, look, I'm not really considering something that's under 100 million ARR, because they know if they're coming at the early stage, they're going to be doing a lot of the kind of grunt work. There's a lot of messy work that they don't want to do. I don't think everyone agrees with me, but I think increasingly having a capital markets edge as a CFO, when you're advising your company on taking big decisions, like understanding your market positioning, macroeconomics plays a big factor right now. And so like, if you don't really understand these market dynamics with interest rates, policy, like all that jazz, not necessarily you have to have investment banking background at Goldman Sachs to be valuable, but at least be knowing enough to be dangerous on that capital markets edge and be able to speak in a sophisticated way, I think is really important.
Welcome to Turpentine Finance, a podcast where we talk with top founders and finance leaders about what it takes to architect success. Our guests speak candidly about big business inflections, market curveballs, and how they approach decision-making so that you have the tactics and mental models for when the pressure is on. I'm your host, Sasha Orloff, founder, CEO, and self-professed finance nerd. You ready? Let's dive in.
Hello. So today is probably the most important episode for every CFO, every aspiring CFO, and anyone who's planning to hire a CFO, because today we have a special guest and an old friend, Chris Sands, who, amongst many things, is the head of jobs at F-Suite. So for those of you not familiar with F-Suite, they're an independent, invitation-only executive peer community where leading CFOs turn to make better, faster decisions that they can use to propel their companies forward. And these include people from Lyft, Bumble, Circle, Nextdoor, Via, Riskified, Fireblocks, Anthropic, Midjourney, Contentful, OnlyFans, Vista Equity, Polaris Group, Upfront Ventures, Felicis, First Round, the who's who of the finance suite. So why am I mentioning this? That's because the F-Suite publishes the F-Suite exclusive data, tech CFO salaries and compensation trends in 2024. So I asked Chris if he'd be willing to join us and talk about some of the key findings from the report and the challenges that face the office of the CFO, how these might differ from stage, and any insights that he has. Why is Chris the authority on this? Well, he has over a decade of experience helping people grow their careers, negotiate salaries as an executive recruiter from Michael Page, partner at Pacific Lighthouse Partners, and now head of recruiting and jobs at F-Suite. So with that said, Chris, welcome to the show.
Sasha, great to connect after almost a decade now, I think. And thanks for that kind intro. It's great to be here.
Yeah, well, as many of us founders know, you can only accomplish as much as the team that you put together in attacking the market. And you've been helpful in me being able to do that. But let's dive in for the audience. So you have insights from a community, I think, of nearly 1,000 CFOs. So let's dive in. The role of a CFO continues to evolve and expand in scope, maybe different than almost any other type of role in the past decade. What are some of the key challenges for CFOs and how are they tackling them?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just that, the fact that the role is evolving, that's kind of the fundamental challenge. So I think where our community really provides a ton of value is when CFOs are able to get together, benchmark with each other, basically crowdsource with really high quality peers, it becomes super valuable. We call ourselves the CFO neural network. So there's this kind of one end that is that sort of on the job, daily sort of job success. And then there's the other sort of career development side, which I'm, a big part of. But I get to sort of watch the sort of collective consciousness of the modern CFO and just like look at that and see what the challenges they're dealing with. So I'll start at like a high level. Like I would say high level, like we're kind of seeing the CFO role like from a sort of reporting function, a sort of analyst function to a core business operational function. So I would say like top performing CFOs, they're able to guide executive teams. They're able to advise boards. They're able to identify future investment opportunities. They're able to drive go-to-market strategies. So we're increasingly seeing the CFO as one of the primary company operators, right? So there's the leadership side where CFOs are playing that role in guiding their companies through these operational, financial, and sort of broader stroke initiatives. but also positioning the company, right? Identifying critical success factors and strategic approaches that drive sustained growth and profitability, and go to market tactics, right? Balancing risk and opportunity, optimizing resource allocation, leveraging data driven decision making to, stay agile in what's rather increasingly volatile landscape seemingly. And really aligning those financial strategies with sales and marketing efforts, the KPIs for early stage successes, and future proofing the go to market plans to capitalizing on emerging trends and technologies. And I'd say finally, from the high level, kind of the exec team and board collaboration, when you're bridging the gap between the financial operations and the strategic vision of the company, those are really soft skills that really differentiate a top performing CFO. On the more ground level, the sort of nitty gritty stuff, I was just looking over the brain trust and I was looking at kind of stuff that people are currently dealing with. There's a few posts on just kind of hiring, structuring the finance team. One question was about what are like the kind of interview approaches when you're hiring like a number two, like a VP of finance. And overwhelmingly, it was all about case studies. Everyone supported the case study model. So one idea was just like you build a lightweight model, a scorecard, an exec summary as a homework assignment for a VP of finance. It seems like kind of structurally like a controller, an FP&A person are kind of core to the finance team. But how you sort of structure it, all the other people on the finance team really is dependent on international exposure, like how much ARR, how many employees there are. And often the treasury and FinOps are reporting through the controller, not directly to the CFO. So it really gets, different depending on those kind of nuances within the company. Other topics are just like in today's technology age, just finding the right tools for the CFO. So FP&A tools, fundraising, investor tracking software, procurement software, board management software, claims management software, like even marketplace payout software if you're a marketplace business, or chargeback tracking software for direct to consumer business. I mean, really just when it comes to the tools that you're leveraging, it becomes incredibly valuable to people to go and benchmark what their peer CFOs are using, as opposed to just like, wandering across Google and asking ChatGPT and trying to put pieces together and read a bunch of blogs. Like you just kind of want to hear it, what your really high quality peers are doing. And then like everything, like within our community, a ton of subscription companies, right? With subscription models. So just everything to do with churn and retention, IPO prep, M&A prep, fundraising dynamics. I can go on. So there's just a few examples of kind of those like on the ground stuff.
And so if we get like a little tactical into, there's this network of information to help support a CFO as they sort of grow into their careers. How do you divide up the type of personalities of CFO, or do you at all? Is it just there is CFO, or are there different buckets? You think about this either by background or by company stage or by industry or by career progression.
Yeah, I would say like you kind of have the VP of finance, head of finance bucket, and then you're kind of real sort of growth stage CFO. If you talk, like I talk to a lot of CFOs just about their careers and kind of I'm always trying to push people to take earlier stage opportunities. And what I find about CFOs is they're like, look, I'm not going to consider something. If they're experienced, they're like, I'm not really considering something that's under 100 million ARR. Like it's not where I'm at. And because they know if they're coming at the early stage, they're going to be doing a lot of the kind of grunt work, standing up a lead finance function there's a lot of messy work that they don't want to do. And they're seemingly beyond that point. So I think it's a great opportunity, and we'll probably get into like strategies for the first time CFO, like how to get to that point. But like, great opportunities like going into that head of finance if you're willing to get your hands dirty and stand up a finance function at the earlier stage.
Let's just dive into that now, actually, where we're going. It seems like a good natural bridge. You've been doing recruiting for quite a while. I'm imagining there's a lot of aspiring CFOs. They're that VP of finance. They're coming in. What are the top 2 to 3 recommendations you give to aspiring CFOs trying to land their very first role?
Yeah. I mean, look, I like I said, for the VP and head of legal, like trying to get that true CFO role, target those early stage companies because they're out there. I was just talking to a company, an AGI company. They're kind of crazy because they've raised publicly. They've announced 145 million and they have 22 employees, and they haven't disclosed like another couple hundred million that they've raised. A lot of that has to do with compute and how expensive that is. But like joining a company like that, that's going to be like a super hands-on, like we don't want someone coming in that just wants to like focus on building a team. We want someone who's really in the weeds. And so that's like a huge opportunity from just a personal growth perspective, potentially like having equity and like a unicorn, and just a super good bridge to being that CFO. And perhaps you come in as a VP of finance and you know change that title to CFO. And we'll get into the compensation ramifications of the title and the kind of disparity between head of legal and CFO. But I would say like targeting those early stage companies as a VP of finance or head of legal is one good point. I would say another thing is just being proactive about, you know, your next move. Oftentimes, and this happens across all levels, super experienced people from not so experienced people, they are happy in their role, and then all of a sudden they decide they want to move for X reason, and then they start the job search. Oh, I'm kicking off the job search now. Okay, I'm getting my hand. I think the job search should never stop. You should always be proactively talking to companies, looking for the next best thing, even if you're 100% content in your current role. So I would say always be generating that job search activity and those opportunities, because you want to be caught up in that wave when, and hires do come in waves. So you want to be caught up in that. So you want to be positioned well and having the right conversations and sort of leveraging your network and expanding your network constantly. And I would say maybe thirdly is just knowing your new unique value in the marketplace and sort of where the market opportunities are, where you uniquely fit in, and maybe coming up with like a couple different scenarios. Oh, maybe I'll take a sort of VP of finance at a public company, or I'll take a CFO role at a rather early stage company, or I'll sort of, you know, switch industries completely, or I'll just narrow in my like, you know, kind of core industry that I've been building so far. So there are a couple different ways. I think you should, you know, people should be really intentional about what sort of routes they should take. Not because I keep seeing it's like, oh, I'm going to cast a wide net. I'm going to keep an open mind and kind of see what comes. No, like start with a few ideas and maybe if you need to expand from there, but give it some thought, be intentional, have a couple different paths that make sense and where your unique value fits into the marketplace.
And if we take the other side of that, so, you know, in your experience, just doing so many executive recruiters, you're working mostly perhaps on behalf of a candidate, or sometimes you're working on behalf of a candidate where a candidate might be that aspiring CFO and trying to land their first role. How do you see it on the other side from a company side? So let's think about a company that maybe has never had a CFO before. Is this something where, you know, the candidate is kind of selling the role and selling themselves, or do you just look for people that happen to already be recruiting a CFO?
Right. Well, I'll first say I love that you mentioned the candidate first, sort of like, you know, working from the candidate side. I mean, I'm unique in that I'm truly candidate first because traditionally how the recruitment industry works is you're completely working on behalf of your client. So the client wants a very specific profile. You're like, I'm going to go find that exact person that you have in your mind and I'm going to do the closest thing. And then I'm going to convince that person to take this job. And I'm going to, even if it's not in their best interest, if you're going to try, you're incentivized to push that person into that job. And so for me, it's fantastic just being candidate first and just guiding people where I think they ought to be and taking the time, just being member first, adding that membership value and not charging any recruitment fees. But I would say, so from the employer side, and maybe you can reframe your question because it's kind of, you're kind of framing it as like, what are employers looking for exactly?
Well, like I think you're in a unique position where, like you mentioned, you're working on behalf of finance executives, helping them navigate their career and find the next opportunity. Traditionally, it's the opposite. It's the company who is hiring the executive recruiter or firm to go find a candidate and source candidates. So I was trying to like sort of just understand a little bit of some of the differences for that, starting with like that first aspiring CFO trying to find and land their first job. What was it like maybe before when you were hired by the company versus now? Meaning, do you need to go convince companies to hire their first CFO, or job postings out there? Like, we should paint a picture of some of the differences. I think it's really unique.
Yeah. I mean, on the other way around, like I'm not going to give any time to candidates that don't fit the exact profile of the job I'm working at the time. So if, it's a Series C CFO, I'm not going to waste my time with a VP of finance that's work at a Series A because they don't fit the bill. So I'm just not going to even take the time to, maybe I would because I'm being proactive and smart and maybe for the future roles. But in general, my focus is going to be targeted on just making that fee for that client. So now it's completely flipped where, yeah, I'm kind of providing that insight, as I kind of mentioned before. Here are some sort of tactics you can use. Let's target, like, where are those 3 areas you think you can fit in well? Okay, now that we identified that, let's download a Crunchbase list. Let's figure out all these exact companies that we can target. And maybe we can look at the companies that don't have a CFO yet, that should have a CFO, and we can like proactively try to open up a role for them. The way that roles have been coming in is largely through our own referral network. So we have the F suite. We also have the L suite. So we have a couple different executive communities, and we're seeing referrals coming through for both. So our chief legal officer community, they're coming to us saying, hey, we need a CFO. Can you pick some people out for the F suite? And vice versa. And then people are just hearing about us in the ecosystem and coming to us. And then also CFOs, they're getting approached by recruiters. They're getting approached by companies. They're ultimately not taking it perhaps. And then they're saying, oh, but Chris can over here, he can find you our membership is so give to get. Like one of the most powerful things is just the willingness of our members to help other members. So if someone's not going to accept a job, they're like, oh, I want to make sure one of our members gets this job. So let's throw it over to Chris, and then Chris can just deliver candidates super fast.
That's rad. So what are some of the differences that you see or what are some of the ways in which you pitch a candidate differently that is the first time and they're ready, or somebody who's an experienced CFO?
Yeah. I'll start with just kind of how I operate in terms of like the job matchmaking process. And so first I get on a very brief call with an employer, like, look, 15 minutes, I'll be able to understand what the heck the profile you're looking for. And sometimes they're like, look, I need someone with at least 15 years experience. I don't want any kind of rising CFOs. I want someone who's sort of been there, done that. And in that case, yeah, I'm not going to try to force a VP of finance down their throat. But other times it's not really that. Like they're kind of still discovering what they want. And the great thing, and I think this is something I advise employers to do. It's like, look, let me just fill your pipeline with a slow drip of candidates so you can just interview nothing but high quality candidates. Forget about flooding your inbox with hundreds of applicants and then figuring out some way to filter those. And, you provide a horrible candidate experience for most people. I sort of get a general sense of what the profile is. I sort of go to our community and I understand, and I get some interest from them. I say, hey, write up 3 bullet points. Forget about the whole resume. I want to do away with the resume. Write up 3 bullet points for me that uniquely qualify you for the role. What's interesting about a resume is supposed to be a one size fits all for all opportunities. And then people try to be like, oh, but I have 5 resumes. There's one for like marketplace companies. There's one for SaaS companies. And it's just like, forget about that. Forget about the resume. Make your LinkedIn look nice. And I'll do warm intros directly to the executives. And I'll insert these 3 bullet points and let you guys take it from there. You tell your story. And so I pretty much get clearance from that employer. Like, look, I know what you're looking for. Trust me on this. And I'm going to make these warm introductions and just hear these people out. So, but it's mainly those 3 bullet points. I let the candidate kind of make that case. And if I think those bullet points aren't really great, I'm like, well, let's like reframe it a little bit. But of course, like, super scrappy, like throwing all those buzzwords out, operational, scrappy, willing to get their hands dirty. It's always like nice to hear, especially when I'm working with these early stage. Rolling up the sleeves. Like I've done the San Francisco thing. I've lived in Silicon Valley. I know those buzzwords well. But I would say, yeah, like just focus on, I give them good insight of just what they're looking for. I'm just like, okay, write out those 3 bullet points and let's just make that warm introduction. And here's how you can tell your story.
How if you do, or how would you prepare a candidate for interviewing in today's age? Like you said, the way before probably was I have different resumes specific on different verticals. I'm trying to smash as many keywords in for some like LinkedIn AI matching system, blah, blah, blah. But now you're like, let's kind of make this a little bit more personal. How do you train and coach people for that? Or what are the common mistakes that they might make that you recommend against?
Yeah, I mean, I generally try to contextualize and humanize the recruitment process. I think for so many decades and continues to be very dehumanized and non-contextual, and like in a world of applications and resumes and still cover letters, it's like, are we still doing these cover letters? And you're making executives write cover letters specific to an application, and you're like asking for their comp info. You expect the executives to do that, and then you like don't even respond to them. It's like absolutely absurd and ridiculous. But yeah, for the interview process, just like understand the business inside and out, understand the product, and make the business case. Just focus on the business case, and I think that's the most important thing. I try not to over prep people. I think that's a mistake too. Just like really know the business, really study the business. Here's some resources. Here's where they're at. Here's kind of what they need, and focus on like how you can help.
What does know the business mean? Because a lot of private companies, there isn't a lot out there. How do you prep for something?
I mean, I try to give them as much information as I know. So I try to get as much information from the client, from the employer as I can, and pass it on to the candidate. And yeah, you're right. I mean, yeah, not everything's always out there, but I would say in that case, like go to the interview super curious and have a lot of questions. I think that's a super big turnoff for an employer. I mean, you probably know that like this person came in and they like didn't ask, basic questions like what's going on with that.
I do find it frustrating when candidates don't come prepared with any questions and are like, all right, what do you want to know about us? We're a private company around. And they're like, what's your mission? And I was like, it's on our website. What are your values? It's on our website. Like I haven't prepped at all. Like they didn't read our website. But then there's sort of things, I guess, the obvious pieces are like read the website, read any press announcements, go to LinkedIn. Maybe there's private information like Crunchbase that you guys help with. Any other ways to think about how do you get insights to how to make that interview successful? Because every company is kind of different.
Yeah, I mean, look at the people, right? Like, study the exec team, study the people. Like, what are their backgrounds like? Like if you're going to be interviewing with somebody on the executive team, like, make sure you look at their LinkedIn profile at least and understand their background. I think that's like basic stuff. So I think if you come to the interview with as much understanding as publicly available, as much understanding of the person as publicly available, and then coming with the intention of really adding business value and understanding the business more, and not and I'm always like, don't talk about location and compensation. It's like your first interview, like that is at the later stage. I get it. Like, just save that talk. Like, we'll deal with that when we get there. And even in the early stages, like, oh, but what's their compensation range? And it's just like, look, I'll, we'll help you with that. We got the comp data. Like, don't worry about it. We're going to help you out there if we get there. Just like focus on the curiosity, the business, the people, the values, and take it from there.
Hey, we'll get back to the conversation in a moment after a word from our sponsors.
The less your business spends, the more margin you keep. But today, everything costs more. So smart businesses are graduating to Netsuite by Oracle. Netsuite is the #1 cloud financial system, bringing accounting, financial management, inventory, HR into one proven platform, helping you reduce IT costs, maintenance costs, and manual errors. Over 37,000 companies have already made the move to Netsuite. Backed by popular demand, Netsuite has extended its one-of-a-kind flexible financing program for a few more weeks. Head to netsuite.com/102. That's netsuite.com/102. Real talk. Most talent leaders haven't yet cracked how to leverage AI for meaningful impact on their hiring processes and business goals. But the leaders who are effectively using AI to transform their recruiting team's efficiency and quality use Metaview. Metaview is the AI assistant for the interview process. Their AI records and transcribes hiring conversations, like intakes, interviews, and debriefs, then provides perfectly summarized notes of everything that was discussed. That means your people can focus on creating a human connection with candidates during calls and save time on the busy work of cleaning up notes after every interview. But it's so much more than just a time saver, because perfect notes means perfect data. For every candidate and every pipeline, hiring teams can make confident, informed decisions, and talent leaders can finally take control of the interview process. Join forward-thinking talent leaders at high-performing organizations like Brex, HelloFresh, and Quora, and check out Metaview. Head over to metaview.ai/heretics to talk to one of Metaview's product experts or get started for free. You'll be up, running, and AI-enabled in minutes.
That's an interesting point. if we're just setting expectations, what should an interview process be for a CFO? That's probably different than a day-to-day engineer or a marketing associate. This is an executive team. It's a really critical, expensive function. We'll talk about comp in a sec. What do you see the differences between people who recruit finance teams well and people that don't?
Yeah, I mean, candidate processes is so important just to keep people excited, especially if you're trying to attract really great talent, which are normally passive, right? Like normally happy in their job. So you have to attract them into the process. So when I'm, when I'm recruiting, I really make sure with the employer that like, hey, I don't want to someone really excited about this, and then they're going to talk to like one of the HR coordinators for like an hour, who's got a bunch of like that just can't happen. So I really want to make sure they go directly to one of the executives. If it's not directly to the hiring manager for this role, at least one of the executives. And typically that's what I see of good processes. So typically it's like, okay, you meet one of the executives and or the hiring manager, and then you kind of meet the rest of the exec team that matter. Sometimes there's a kind of case study. I think it's less so in the CFO stuff. That's more kind of VP of finance stuff. But usually it's fairly quick where you go directly to one of the executives and then you kind of meet the entire team. And then maybe you meet directly one-on-one with the CEO, and then we're kind of at the offer stage. So I've experienced actually pretty smooth in terms of process from the CFO side.
Should CFOs or should companies introduce the CFO to the finance team or as part of the interview screening process? Or should it be an executive decision and then tell the team that this is their new boss?
I would take the easy answer and say it depends. I mean, maybe it depends on the culture that company has. I don't see it as like a total must have, but I think it's a nice approach. I'd be curious on, like, and just a side note on like, when we introduced candidates to you back in the day, like people were like to the moon when they would, after they interviewed with you and most of the team, because they're like, this culture is so fantastic. Like I really resonate with this culture. I'm so excited. So if you embed that in your culture of like transparency, like that can really help sell candidates and provide a really great experience. So if you want to differentiate yourself as an employer, perhaps that's a good route, but in no way I see it as kind of a must have and absolutely necessary.
And any recommendations now for me or people like me that are recruiting? And then maybe think about, let's take 3 cases. What happens for somebody that's thinking about recruiting their first CFO? What about somebody who might have had a CFO, their first CFO, and it was not a good fit and they need to replace it? Or maybe the company is growing faster than the CFO and they need to think about it. Any advice to the company side or the founder side?
Yeah, I would say, look, like if you have a vision that you need a CFO, then I think you just got to start talking with CFOs. I think like you're not 100% certain that you need a CFO until you actually start talking to CFOs. So I would say start talking to CFOs. If you have any inkling, like you should. And like we're a good resource for that because you come to us and you just get like sort of referral based CFOs at a nice click. So you can go through that discovery process for yourself. And even if you're 100% sure you want a CFO, you might not know exactly what that person looks like. So you can sort of benchmark against a really high quality pipeline and see what that looks like. And I think maybe a lot of founders and CEOs, they sort of hesitant, like, I don't really want to like kickstart this whole process, because you like publish it live to the world. And, sometimes you want to go a little discreet, right? And sometimes you're replacing your CFO. You want to be discreet. So it's a good sort of value to employers where they can just, all right, let's kind of feel this out. Let's get some candidates kind of talking to. But I'd say if you have any sense that, perhaps that's someone you need, then you should start talking and keep in mind that like a finance leader is not only a finance person, like they are a strategic partner in the business, a strategic leader in the business. So, and increasingly you're seeing like CFOs really bridge into like a CFO/COO. Like, they can be a really strong executive that's not only the finance person, but perhaps even a dual COO role. So I'd say start talking to CFOs.
Hey, we'll get back to the conversation in a moment after a word from our sponsors.
The tech world turns to the Brave browser for its unbeatable privacy protections. But did you know that Brave also has a private ad platform? Brave Ads offers first-party targeting, and it's been cookieless since day one, so you can relax while third-party tracking cookies disappear from the web. Today, millions of people turn to ad blockers to avoid being tracked and pestered online. But Brave's new ad model aligns incentives for users and advertisers. Users earn rewards for viewing ads, which they can save, spend, or pass along to their favorite creators. And advertisers score points for respecting user privacy, generating ROI without invasive tracking. So whether it's high-impact announcements on the new tab page or keyword-targeted ads in Brave Search offers diverse, private, future-proof ad formats for all your business goals. Join the future of advertising at brave.com/ads. Mention Turpentine to get 25% off your first campaign.
Omneky uses generative AI to enable you to launch hundreds of thousands of ad iterations that actually work, customized across all platforms with a click of a button. I believe in Omneky so much that I invested in it, and I recommend you use it too. Use CogRev to get a 10% discount.
I want to get to comp, but I have 2 or 3 more questions before we get there. When you meet a candidate, what do you think are the top contributing reasons that separate a good CFO from a great CFO, at least in terms of like the ability to place them easier, or what makes CFOs easier to place than others?
Yeah, there's kind of like the on paper stuff that does obviously help get you in the door and get them interviewing, right? Oh, they were at X company, and everyone knows about X company, and then just their sort of successes, right? They grew from 5 employees to 500, and they went from inception to IPO. Like that whole story, of course, is very attractive. But I think when I'm talking to candidates, like how they tell that story is, a big part of what's going to actually get them the job, and their approach. When I feel like a candidate is really trying to sell me really hard and kind of, forces their background on me and tries to convince me, I get immediately turned off. When I have candidates kind of coming to me and they kind of sit back and they kind of let the conversation sort of go where it goes, and they don't try to force it in any particular way, that's really nice. I think employers like that approach too, when they, you become a really good listener and a good storyteller, because storytelling becomes a big part of the role. Like when you're bridging the gap between the board and the exec team, and really trying to convince the company of taking strategic decisions that are going to affect the company, your storytelling capabilities become really powerful. So it's those soft skills that I look after. Yes, of course, like when I see that particular background that looks really nice, CFO of X company, that's great. But I've also seen people with that really don't interview well, and they don't end up being like a superstar. So if you have both those, really strong background plus really good storyteller, you're going to do really well.
It is interesting over the course of the last 20 years that a lot of the CFO roles used to come from accounting backgrounds, which was like a very hard skill, tactical skill set advice, and the evolution to needing to tell more storytelling and be part of board meetings and fundraising and recruiting and business alignment really can come across in an interview in a nice way.
Yeah. Most people probably don't see auditors as the most charismatic people in the room, but yeah. And I would even take it one step further of just I say this a lot. I don't think everyone agrees with me, but I think increasingly having a capital markets edge as a CFO when you're advising your company on taking big decisions, like understanding your market positioning from a sort of macroeconomics, like macroeconomics plays a big factor right now. And so like, if you don't really understand like these market dynamics with interest rates, policy, like all that jazz, not necessarily you have to, have investment banking background at Goldman Sachs to be valuable, but like at least be knowing enough to be dangerous on that capital markets edge and be able to speak in a sophisticated way, I think is really important.
All right, last 2 questions and we'll dive into comp. What are 2 sort of insights or misconceptions that you have after doing this for a decade that you don't think other people believe, or advice that people don't listen to you as much on that they should?
Yeah, I kind of touched on this before, but it's that like the the job search or the job progression, the career development is a marathon. It's not like this stop and start process of, oh, need a job. All right, start process. It's got to be constant. Like, and that's where I think communities like ours, you're always building new relationships organically by collaborating with your peers, and you're always going to our conferences and dinners and our virtual clubhouses and just staying active on the networking front. And when I say networking, like, I feel like people think like I don't like to wear a name tag and go to a seminar and try to force conversations in these groups. I don't either. I hate that. Find valuable one-on-one, reciprocal connections that you can sort of keep on going on a natural basis. We do this one-to-one sort of direct matching with our members just to keep that going like clockwork. So they're constantly building those new relationships, but that's just got to keep going. So I would say that's the number one thing that comes to mind is just still, it's like, hey, Chris, yep, I'm kicking off the job search now. It's like, dude, and also just like being open-minded about taking interviews, even though you're in your job, like just take a call. It's okay. No harm done. And I'm really busy. I'm like, yeah, it's okay. Like, you don't have to conform to their schedule. Let them conform to yours. I know you're busy. No problem. Say you're available for 15 minutes in 2 weeks. And if they don't like that, no problem. Be open to having those conversations because you just don't know where they're going to lead down the road if you meet a nice connection through the interview process. And like I said, the employers need to use these conversations as a benchmarking tool as they're hiring their CFOs. So you're providing value to them by taking those calls so they can match you against someone else and discover what they really need.
And last question, what is the average time it takes from somebody saying, I need a new job or I want a new job, not passively, but actively, till they land that job?
Yeah, some people are more fortunate than others, right? Some people just like, everyone wants to talk to them. And others, it's really hard. They really got to grind through it. So there's a big gap between the really strong candidate and a so-so candidate and how long that will take. But I would say, like, for these executive hires, they take a lot of time, and employers stop and start the process. They reconsider. They're super bullish on making this hire super fast, and then something happens. They change their mind. These processes can take months and months and months. And so that's why it's even more important to just have some irons in the fire while you're going. And then, God forbid, if you need to leave or, something happens, and you have some pretty solid leads. And yeah, it's great when you're playing with the house's money, right? If you have a great job and you don't really need to leave, that's just a really great spot to be in. Then when you really need a job and you got a mortgage and you got college for your kids that you need to save up for, like, you don't want to be in that position because employers can sense that when there's some slight, like, I need a job.
Yeah. And that's probably why the F-suite is so attractive and has so many people right away. It just helps prepare you and expedite you, and you get to work with you. All right. Speaking of the F-suite, all right, CFOs, the role spends most of their days thinking about and analyzing financial numbers. But obviously the numbers that matter the most personally are the things that come into the bank account, whether that's comp through salary or bonus or equity. And, I don't think Googling and hitting Glassdoor is like probably the most reliable set of data. So you guys do run a CFO comp survey. I'd love to hear, what are some of the key insights that you found?
Yeah. No, it's such a good point. I mean, finding reliable data, and yeah, perhaps you can Google some data and you get, CFO. I mean, there's such a broad range of CFOs in the world, right? Like, if you're in the sort of venture capital space, like, you want to know, like, oh, what are Series C people in San Francisco getting? What are private equity backed, companies getting in New York? Like, you want to be able to really get granular and know kind of what your peers are making. So that's where this really becomes super valuable. And yeah, a lot of people use this data in their comp negotiations with their employers. So some high level, some insights here. So for the median base compensation, so this is across the US, so the median base compensation that we got from our members is $345,000. So in our 2024 annual comp survey,
I'm in the wrong job. I'm talking to people on a podcast. I need to brush up on my CFO skills.
And that's a 15% increase from 2023. So that's really interesting to see that 15% increase.
Did you, just as a group, are you seeing increases like that across the board in other industries, or is that more pronounced in the finance world?
I think it's a little more pronounced in the finance world. Yeah. We're not seeing other executives like going down in salary, but I think the 15% year over year is quite.
Totally. That's like 5 times inflation. That's great.
Yeah. No, for me, the CFO market still remains pretty tight. I think companies are having a hard time finding really high quality CFOs. So CFOs are in a pretty good position. They got some leverage here. Median total compensation. So that landed at $450,000 in 2024, and that's a 17.6 increase from 382,500 in 2023.
Meaning that means like sort of equity and bonus levels are going up as well as a key teaser or carrot to get people to come in.
Yes.
Wow. That's insane.
And so among respondents, annual CFO base salaries range from 300, so that's a 25th percentile, to 390,000, which is a 75 percentile. And so I mentioned the median 345. And so total compensation for CFO spans from 375 on the 25 percentile to 530 on the 75 percentile, with a median of 450.
Hot damn.
So we're seeing that decent range. And this one's kind of interesting in terms of geography. So in 2024, CFOs in Los Angeles have the highest median base salary. And those based in New York.
More than New York or San Francisco.
Those based in New York have the highest median total compensation. So total compensation, but the base was the highest in LA. And then this is actually a shift from 2023, because in 2023, it was San Francisco that led in both categories. So maybe the San Francisco exodus is real and having some effect here.
Yeah, or there's a homeless premium. Are you going to deal with all the homeless in the cities of LA and San Francisco? You got to be compensated appropriately for that.
And so we mentioned the total compensation element, so the bonus part of that. So the bonus amounts seem to be trending upward. So in 2024, just over 84% report receiving an annual bonus, with a median target of 35%, compared to 72% reported receiving bonuses with a typical range of 30 to 35%.
Got it. So more people receiving bonuses and higher bonuses year over year. And then anything else, like sort of when we think about the differences between sometimes C-suite and others, there's other types of things that can also come in outside of comp. The role of a CFO, sometimes, in an M&A or an IPO, you can lose your job as sort of part of that acquisition. Other sort of notable perks to think about for CFOs?
Yeah, so we've seen some notable perks trending up, including rates of guaranteed severance, also executive coaching budgets, and of course the kind of formal remote working arrangements, and the ability to early exercise options. So all those are pretty solid. And on the remote work, this is more anecdotal from my side, but the roles, when I'm seeing these executive roles, 50% are fully 100% remote. And then the other stuff I'm seeing on the other, and it could be even more than that, but anecdotal, it feels like 50% are fully 100% remote. And then the other half are a hybrid, like it's like a 2 to 3 in the office a week. And I'm just not seeing it all. Like, hey, this person's got to have their ass in a seat 5 days a week. That's what we do. Like, I'm just not seeing that, period, which is fantastic for me. I'm a full believer in remote. We've been remote from the very beginning, before it was trendy. And so I love that trend, but it's fascinating to see that you're just not seeing those hybrid. But it creates an interesting dynamic. When I was recruiting back in San Francisco over a decade ago, like, we were doing a lot of relocations, like I was basically taking the traditional finance people from New York, saying, hey, come over to Silicon Valley, work with a startup. And, you do the whole relocation stuff and the package and all that stuff. But I don't think we're seeing like someone doing a reload package so they could be in the office 2 days a week. So it's really weird. I have a feeling that ultimately even the hybrid model is kind of going to turn out to be like not really that great of a model, because you want to hire the best talent kind of wherever they are. People are more like, look, I want to work remote. It's just where I am. So like, I think we're probably going to see like, okay, well, once a month we're going to meet in LA and we're going to do like a cultural little offsite thing. And I think that is like the future. I think that's a really great model to maintain a cool culture.
Yeah. Probably goes against my own interests as a founder of a growing company, but would love your advice on how should CFOs negotiate comp? Like, you have your ranges, you know this information. Obviously, if you get thrown out an offer that is in the median or above the range, you probably take it. Maybe you negotiate more. What if it's below? How do you successfully negotiate up comp for a job?
So I have one tactic that I recommend, and by no means do I say this, a lot of CFOs just have much better sort of intuition than I do on these negotiations, right? And they're executives and they've done it like a lot of times, so they're well versed. But I would say if you're really hitting a wall on cash, and a lot of times executive teams are kind of framing these ranges, especially in the earlier stage. It's like, look, like we set this range for the executive team where we're all kind of equals, and we just set that intentionally, but we have this equity stuff. It's like, okay. So my view on that is like, okay, well, if you want me to go under market, F-Suite has this comp data that says it's higher than that. Like, so if you're asking me to take below market cash, well, I want above market equity. And I'm going to put this number out there. And I recommend be bold with that number, like do a really ambitious equity number. And they're going to probably be like, oh my God, that's way, above. And then they can be like, well, let's put the cash up a little bit. Does that make you a little bit happier? So then they can kind of play with that. So, you have these sliding scales. And when you make the equity ask, it makes it puts forth that you really believe in the company. So I think it's a really like, if you look greedy when you're asking for cash, but if you ask for equity, you're like, oh, they're like true believers. That's cool. So I think they're, making that really strong equity ask can help balance the scales. And they ultimately either you really get a really strong equity, which is very cool, or they meet you up a little bit so I'd say that's a good lever to pull, is that equity piece. So I think that's one way to go. Another thing that we did a lot is sign-on bonuses. So it's like, okay, well, you're not going to be able to match what I sort of need on a salary, but at least match me there for the first year. So let's do a sign-on bonus to get me there. So that's another sort of tactic that I've seen.
Are negotiations now still happening at the rate that they used to? Is it expected that people are negotiating, or do you see cases where people are like, look at this is the comp, take it or leave it?
I feel like I've seen more of that. I feel like I've seen more, employers. I mean, it's different with different executives and stuff. And it feels like I've seen more of just like, this is where we're at. Like we have some more candidates like that. And so, yeah, it does feel like that. But I think you have to push against that. Like, I don't think you should accept that as that's just the way things are. You should certainly, I think we're still in a world where, we have business mindset and, we can make counter offers. I think 100% make counters.
How do you, last question, then we can talk a little about F-Suite, and we're all running out of time because I always get so excited about this stuff. How do you frame, or how do you recommend for somebody that doesn't negotiate? And if somebody says like, here's our comp, it's the take it or leave it, it's not negotiable. How do you recommend reapproaching that conversation to open it up?
Yeah, this comes where like data becomes really important, right? Like you take out the emotional piece. You could, if you were to say, look, I got a daughter in college, and like this is just gonna put me like I can't afford it. Like you don't want to go there. So if you can just remain objective and just present the data, then that really kind of takes all that stuff out, and it just makes you look like a data-driven decision maker, which is fair, and that makes it not unreasonable, right? You're just simply presenting the data. So I'd say that's the sort of best approach you can do, is use the data.
Yeah, that's what works on me the most. I was just wondering if there were any other tricks that I need to be aware of. All right, last couple questions, and then we got to wrap up, unfortunately. Tell me a little more. Why F-Suite? You've been doing this career in executive recruiting for a long time. What got you excited to join F-Suite?
Yeah, I mean, we're sort of building the next evolution of professional networks. It's a super strong mission to be behind. I love my role just in terms of using my exec search background and flipping the model on its head and being candidate first. That's the part I always love the most, is working with candidates and helping them in their careers. So now I get to do that on a systematic level and try to scale it and really make a splash in the ecosystem and tell employers out there, like, zero fees, candidates, super high quality, super fast, not hundreds of thousands of dollars with these fancy write-ups and super slow processes that drag you out for months and months and months. Just come to us. We're going to get you some super high quality people and like strategically make that hire without flooding your pipeline with just chaos. Like, yeah, and trying to dig through for those one candidates, but they're still not even referred necessarily. Like, they might look on paper, but you don't really know, like, you don't have any kind of referral point. So just getting a curated pipeline that's sort of elastic, like, okay, let's like turn on the gas, let's get this pipeline a little stronger. Okay, let's kind of back off. That's a good amount. So I'm trying to create that unmatched employer experience while creating an unmatched membership experience is fantastic. And I just love that. But furthermore, just seeing the impact on the day to day, like, and seeing that you discover that, God, people really like to help each other, if given the opportunity. So you have this really experienced CFOs, some less experienced, and they're all coming together around topical issues, day-to-day stuff, novel things that are coming up. If you're a first-time CFO, you're going to be throwing a lot of stuff that you have no idea how to handle, and you want to look good to your exec team and board. So you just ping the F-Suite community on the Brain Trust, and you're going to have some really great people who've been there, done that, giving you super practical, actionable advice. And that's just a really powerful impact. And so having those kind of two things working together, the career development stuff that I'm really focused on, but also that day-to-day sort of SaaS crowdsourcing peer network, like, it's super powerful. And yeah, I mean, fundamentally, I'm just bullish on the company, long term. I've been here for 6 years, and I got the early equity in the company, and I'm excited, like, at the prospects, down the road. We never took on VC money, so we've been kind of organically growing. It's, when you grow in a community, it's hard to just, VC supercharge it, right? Like, growth hack it. You do have to be, really mindful about, fostering a community of people and getting them to interact with each other. But it's super fantastic.
That's incredibly powerful, and probably the best way to end this, because that is compelling. How do people learn more about F-Suite, and how do they get a hold of you?
Yeah, fsuite.co. That's our website. And yeah, you can contact me. I'm all over LinkedIn, of course. I post a lot about the jobs we do. You can send me a message, send me an invite to connect. You can reach me at chris@fsuite.co. And you can apply to be a member. It's invitation only. So, like, you can apply to basically get an invitation, but you could also contact me and I can see what I could do to get you a nomination to join.
Love it. Awesome. Chris, thank you so much for sharing this and coming on board. I appreciate it. And congrats on everything you're doing.
Yeah, this is super fun, and congrats on all your success.
Thanks. All right. Thanks,
Sasha. All right.
Thanks for tuning in to Turpentine Finance. Share with your executive team, direct reports, friends, and family. If you want to support the show, the best ways are to leave a review wherever you're listening and subscribe. Turpentine Finance is part of Turpentine, the podcast network behind Moment of Zen, Turpentine VC, Age of Miracles, and more. Shows for experts by experts in tech.